I am glad to announce today that I was able to finally reach a good night's rest of sleep from my sleeping schedule from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So saying these extra hours that I desperately needed. Nonetheless, I woke up sleepy again and procrastinated, sleeping from 6:40 a.m. to 7:50 a.m. for an extra 5 minutes. So I ended up leaving later since I still had to shower and I'll get ready at 8:10 a.m. And I wanted to go to school in the morning for an early morning's walk, but I wasn't able to. And no breakfast either because I didn't wake up in time. So I just brought some graham crackers and a yogurt with a side of meat to bring me forward to school. I was reminded by my parent multiple times that I got to bring a lot of sunscreen and it's going to be very hot today. There was traffic while on the road and there were people coming, so I had to wait in excess of 10 minutes as there was also a construction blockage diverting traffic in radically different directions. So we usually take a path that goes straight across from a different direction near the school. As my sister used to go on that route centuries ago in internet terms when she was back here. But this day we had to take it straight and go to the most traffic where it's most concentrated 99% of the time where it's going. I reached school around 8:23 a.m. and I made it barely on time, though I feared being late again. In order to adapt to this relatively quickly, I always write down notes of the class and staple. But consequently, and divinely, I knew that I have to start with a single paper as entering this class means going head on late with daily quizzes and verb reviews that need to be done first. I reached school approximately 8:27 a.m. and I also noticed a bike that was locked that's near the school gates. And I wonder what security does with those since, nonetheless, it's very easily robbed near that part of the school. But nonetheless, the traffic blockage going into the school was a mess, and I was hoping the teacher would not mark me late today, but even though I came right after the bell, sadly, she did mark me late. Spanish 3. The teacher talked about how our weekend was, and she said she didn't do much herself, but announced after that we should catch up with work assignments and participation as work ramps faster. The next activity was reading Cecilia and Alex's awkward love story for the review. We translated and we helped with specific words in front of the teacher, such as empuja. The story itself we read on paper and pushed to the point is when Alex exercised and tried to flaunt his muscles to his novia, Cecilia, outside a window where she was, but she was wearing glasses and was revealed to be blind at the end. So before the weights got to him, as he was staring at her, he fell into a dream where he kissed Cecilia and got the strength to lift up the weight. But once he saw the reality that she's wearing a cane and is blind, eventually the weights came back to him and crushed him. So he spent time in the hospital, as the story said. The class was attentive, but I noticed a lot were definitely shaking now. Next was a video animation where the teacher paused, pressed stop, and asked us to narrate in Spanish. And I found the video incredibly short because it skipped straight to the window scene without all the parents' dialogue. I assumed when he looked for the weights, he'd go across the building, but I just noticed that it's in his room. But I also talked to my table partner, but he himself still didn't even understand some of it too. The part was that we had to answer questions and more conjugamos assignments later on for homework, so we have two assignments at this point. He gave me about a few more answers here and there, but he didn't really have as much of trouble. Though I noticed a lot of people nearby were also working on other work such as English, and there was a new TA that had lots of items dangling out. I also stared at the Spanish posters. I also heard an Instagram notification as the phone Catty was there. Then I left as the class bell rang. Although there isn't really much to note, everybody just grabbed their bags and left as fast as possible. And moving down to period 2 English, today the weather was a little bit colder but still very humid. But I noticed another person I spoke to before as I passed the corridor, but upon reaching class, the teacher handed us 5 minutes, and I noticed even much across the tables. Many still weren't finished with the poster. So I did mine, but I felt mine was more basic than it is complex. So I tried to speak, but most were busy at this point. I felt nervous as we are to swap posters with this and interpret them on a paper to make a crawl conclusion next. And I noticed most were busy. Teacher then woke the class saying, "This doesn't work by osmosis, guys. Please move, go trade with someone." So I switched with Madeline's paper and credit to her. I inferred that a lot weren't done partially because of fear, but then again, there are also new transfers. I observed at this point in time that the class was talking mostly quietly, and some about the poster, others about how crazy their time has been, and an Easter egg that I left on my poster for that last video that I made. The giant number 600185500041300700700140012. And I wonder what they infer of that number. For the CROW acronym, I got confused with the evidence and the reasoning part that because both can still technically use examples. So I fixed my thinking in the R of the reason that it should be like the logic and rule part that determines how evidence is seen. I spent 20 minutes doing that, but I changed the R from the poster color show this to the symbols and colors used in a given drawing represent the perception and also the tone should be conveyed to the watcher and listener. So that then slid smoothly into the evidence, so I understand that bit better. But the teacher was more of an ice brick today, usually more relaxing, but the class was more like a river because of people. Anyway, but nonetheless, weather is still hot as always. I stayed for an extra 5 minutes trying to write some notes down to the class. But moving down to period 3 math, today the teacher announced the weather is very hot and he even planned other activities too, but saying that it's too bad now. Next, we worked on our week 3 math review in the long road prep for a CASP quiz, a test. And these were two equations such as 42 minus b over 3 is equal to 50. I finished up to 67% and later the teacher announced another lesson who transfer the iPad for solving to random people for our next lesson that involves beanstalk that grows exponentially. It's random people like last time, but most people were quiet. So his philosophy is different. And I know if this same iPad philosophy was done last year, the other teacher would be anxious to what the results would be, at least from my last year's teacher. But nonetheless, I was able to finish stuff, although it did go pretty fast. The teacher did notice that his classroom has a little bit of lore, spiders in his closet. There's a lot of bugs that are even then, girl did try to end up taking one of the spiders. Even then, that spider eventually disappeared and did not go near the girl as she was trying to take it away. Moving down to period 4, science. Sadly, all the boys' restrooms I visited are closed, so I had to hurry to period 4 across the place. And upon entry, as I put my phone away, Diesel hurried to the restroom because of the same reason I was worried about. But anyways, the class was mostly there, but everyone was paying more attention today than Friday, I think, because of the feeling of Monday in a new week. But today we continued on the Green Revolution notes, and the teacher said that it's good for least developed nations because it helps in food resources, but has long-term negative effects. But for help about nature, she said, let's whitewash this word, and it relates to the word chap and the barn. Relating it like a cog in the slides lesson that she presented, and she also said that weather's climate change is challenging using another example. She also talked about her camping trip this time where I asked her, she thought I needed help on the paper because I raised my hand saying, but I said, like, where do you camp at? Not like I don't need help on the paper. But she did chuckle a little bit, but she did say her story about Sierra Lakes and about climate change. It was shown that she was there, but she was not envisioning of how the summer would be. And it was some crazy weather change because she was there in the summer one time, but it was actually snowing up there. So she was pretty crazy, and she related this to the future effects of climate change. And it related to the cost of the Green Revolution is also akin to this, and how this type of thing will affect long-term projections in terms of a negative way. The Green Revolution is akin to all this agriculture stuff that she's also teaching. An example was also a chicken farm. One gets sick, all of the rest of the chickens also get sick. In class, most people were attentive, but I noticed most watched the teacher. But the teacher was silenced a few times. It was a bit awkward. The lights were off, and she was still presenting. Though the teacher shared a story about her little brother who also relates to this type of monoculture thing. A hillbilly who sometimes attends both jujitsu and also goes out camping and hunting animals a lot. And from a jujitsu practice, he burned his skin using a rope during practice. He got sent to ER, but it turns out there was MRSA on that rope, so that MRSA on his arm spread pretty fast. And she relates this because like monoculture and singular places, this is caused due to antifungal use, for example. There's also direct resistance toward antibiotics. So even then, that place that has like a lot of cleaning supplies, that place that has a ton of things that keep people clean, even then, MRSA still managed to spread because of that. It's already developed a genetic immunity. And I saw the picture showed us, and the arm was red and had so much incisions on his arm that they were to amputate it had it not been for pure luck. But like monoculture and antibiotic resistance, this relates because the long-term projection is bad, whether it's climate change or this type of thing. In a side way, she described that even for monoculture too, flowers that are bred for aesthetics. She said in hybrids, when you give your GFBF flowers or you give your flowers to plants, that's practically like giving the plant version of reproductive organs. She said for us not to utter out what we're thinking those same ways, those flowers too might eventually die off if they're not as resilient, despite such good value. Besides, this monoculture also goes to soy, wheat, corn, and other highlighting profits over health and aesthetics, but also highlighting that it's outdated. She presented other examples in her slide about the right way to do agriculture, but in my table, mostly everyone around remained joking, but not much to note other than a few messes with tape and Chinese jokes where I kind of chuckled when they said it. She also mentioned a podcast about ologies that's, I believe, available online if we want to debate climate change more. Heading down to lunch. For the first initial 10 minutes, the weather was incredibly scorching, and I still had to spend this time looking for an open restroom as not many were open at this time. Sadly, I even asked security where it is, but they didn't say either. One was on lunch duty, so when I came back and asked the standing principal where it is, they said it's open, so I just realized the boys' restroom near the gym where I last visited was closed, is already open, so I kind of wasted my time there. Anyways, once I used that restroom, of course, there were also vapors too. I reached upon a decision that these next scheduled interactions could occur in the library because right now the weather is too hot. I decided to break off to another random person. This time, this is a much older girl. She looks like my man, but she isn't, but whom also deceived me because of stature, but it's also a senior. I sat down, I did the basics, but I decided to finish up my math and work at the same time. I tried out the fastballs, which were about to, but she was more polite than she was ready to talk, so to speak. So I tried to go more and ask what they're up to, maybe go up with a slider ball at this point, but I'd say that they made more repulsive instead of responsive and mostly vague. So as much as it is, I tried my best to talk to him, but not much I could do further than that. But nonetheless, the tunnel library was much cooler, and I also visited my friend who was upstairs, but they're also mostly quiet and chill, except those crazy boys again, of whom staff and the big buff guy were called in multiple times to silence. Before period 5 began and lunch ended, Davin came right behind me and he told me that he saw me at Food for Less yesterday. So I joked to him, why didn't you take a picture of me? Because I need evidence that he was actually there, not making things up. And he made jokes here and there, and he said that I should have been there instead and met him. And he also said a few others. So I counted with meet me there again today. And I said I'll call Napoleon. He said, are you gonna call the Stasi? And I was saying like, alright, bro, that's enough. Anyways, I wish that guy a good goodbye. I pat him before I eventually left. But heading down for period 5, we have a new unit for government, and we moved seats again. And we answered our first work unit for 3 sentences on what democracy means to a person. I also got moved with an old veteran class partner from Mr. Lewis' class last year to a side table. That class was as quiet though, but people didn't really move much other than do work around. But I did notice one time on for work, we have a timeline activity for U.S. history with 8 slips that we have to put on the timeline. And I noticed that 2 were not years that were plotted on the timeline, which are 1774 and 1787. And I had trouble here because I'm not sure if we were supposed to be given this or if this is like a wrong copy of the timeline sheet. But nonetheless, I didn't put it. The teacher didn't do much either. So lofi music played as we answered 3 questions about this and what we thought. And like last time, we are to speak to our partner and some might also present up to the class. I caught right off guard as a teacher ended up picking me to answer the first time about what we think for the first question is the easiest thing to remember. But others, such as Ava, also went up. But the next one was an activity of vocabulary to define 10 terms on the left and draw a picture on the right. I finished mine with a stamp, so I'll have to do the aesthetics and the uploading of this one later to my computer. But nonetheless, it'll only save me like 2 minutes in class tomorrow. Many people have already finished. But nonetheless, it was pretty easy. Credit to my friend in that class. Getting down to period 6 arts, I would call this more of a relief teacher's time because I already told you guys our trade deadlines of this class ended last Friday, last week, at least for our personal narrative here. And I think at this point, period 6 art is a little bit easy. I'm not saying it's going to be not stressful, but I think after an exhausting day, this is probably what I need in terms of relaxing before getting to do work later on. But as I reached out, I decided to snack on some Belvita crackers, and I knew that the weather was so hot today that the crackers, even as I was heading down to period 6, felt more like baked cookies that were hardened under air. So they were not, they did not feel like crackers at all. A little bit though. But in art though, nonetheless, I was given my first cardboard portfolio and the teacher instructed us to work on the theme for free draw or last week's one, as tomorrow we're going to also be working on something else. But anyways though, I did ask my friend on how to string this portfolio because usually, like shoelace, you need specific instructions to tie this. So my friend told me that we just have to do it a specific way. So there are two strings here. There's both of these connect to each other, and we're supposed to connect these to each holes that are on the bottom of each portfolio's cardboard side. One goes to the bottom, the other goes to the top, and the other one goes to the bottom, the other one goes to the top. Like reverse, reverse, reverse. Draw like an X shape, like a shoe, and then eventually tie it. Although the string is mostly for aesthetic, though. As for period 6, most talk to each other, but I did speak to a girl from my former freshman class, Miss Franken, but she spoke of what she's doing, so I rekindled myself there, but it mostly went well. I had to strap my portfolio as a transfer too, because I got mine pretty late, but I did spend 15 minutes trying to do so. Later, I continued on the reassignment, drawing random items for the Halloween and fall decor theme, and I spent 20 minutes also drawing flowers, pumpkins, and other themed merchandise. But at 3:14 p.m., the phone Catty fell, but I was unable to find mine at the mess because everybody was trying to find their own too. The teacher said if anything got damaged, to report it immediately, as the school office will be responsible for that. But no one phone got damaged here, so we're good for that. But nonetheless, not too much occurred here. I was able to finish up. I still have to do that art theme later on. Credit to James, the Chinese friend from math class, Edan from period 6, Jude from period 1, and our three table partners there, and Funny Boys in period 4 science, the girl in lunch, the period 5 veteran classmate, and the period 6 teacher. I don't for extra details. I saw my teacher from freshman year. For an old English class as I was passing today to the gate, but it was absolutely hot in this weather, and it is unlivable as unlivable is. But anyways, as I was right in the school office exit, I had to move approximately 5 feet down specifically because there's these annoying bugs again that occur during the summer, and there were some mosquitoes. I knew that even though this is not a beehive of mosquitoes, I would end up stinging me. Um, Thankfully, nonetheless, I was able to move, and the weather was still pretty hot. This is absolutely crazy in terms of climate, like fourth grade teacher was saying, but I still don't know why I'm not wearing sunscreen. I'll be honest with that. I don't know if I'm just not making time for it or I'm just being like lazy, but